My head landed on one rock, my boat landed on my head. My head took the impact from both sides. I had knocked myself out while kayaking. That helmet was CE certified. The Rapid was Class 3.
What you might not know is that there is no safety standard in the U.S. for whitewater helmet manufacturers.
I'm Boyd Ruppelt.
And I'm Catherine Ruppelt.
And this
is Crossing Currents.
Welcome to Crossing Currents, our new podcast. We are so excited to be talking to the whitewater community and beyond.
We're going to be talking about how to navigate risk, pressure, and the decisions that shape who we become.
I'm Boyd Ruppelt, a professional whitewater kayaker and instructor.
I'm Catherine Ruppelt. I'm a senior producer in public radio and also a happy Class 3 paddler.
Today we're going to talk about one of the most important decisions that we make as whitewater paddlers: what kind of helmet to wear.
Yeah, a good helmet can make the difference between staying safe and alive or not. I think we all know that.
All right, story time. I was just doing wave wheels, minding my own business on a Class 3 Rapid. I had a low-profile helmet on, and I just went for a big aired-out wave wheel and was reaching around to throw the stern in next. But my stern caught a shallow spot. There was a rock under the water that I didn't know about. It slammed me down head first onto another rock behind it, and then my boat, which was airborne, landed down on my head. It was like a hammer and anvil, lights out. I woke up laying on the back of my boat with my friends chasing me. Apparently, I had rolled while I was unconscious. I had a horrible concussion. It gave me a stutter for months that I still have when I get tired. This happened back in college. The thing is, that concussion was probably avoidable. It was a Class 3 Rapid. It was not the hardest hit that I've taken as a kayaker. That impact actually could have, and if you talk to a medical professional, because it fractured my C1 and knocked me out, should have killed me. And I know other people that have drowned the same way and been revived, where they've knocked themselves out and then drowned afterward and then had to have CPR done to be resuscitated. Concussions are a real risk. I've had my fair share.
I have not, but I have certainly been around when people have taken some pretty heavy hits.
All right, so I did some digging. The ACA, the American Canoe Association, did a survey back in 2024, and they had 520 respondents, which isn't a huge number, but it's for paddle sports, it's significant. Nearly half of the respondents had a head or neck injury from paddling.
That's crazy. That's a lot of people.
That is a lot of people. Nearly half. And over a sixth of them, almost 1 in 5, reported a concussion from paddling.
But what a lot of people might not know is that there is no standard in the U.S. that helmet manufacturers have to meet to put a whitewater helmet on the shelf for consumers.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
It's nuts that there's no standard.
Now, a lot of companies do follow the standard that the European Union has set, which is called the CE 1385 standard.
But it should be noted that that is the lowest bar of any sport to pass.
Which is crazy, given how much we hit our heads or certainly the risk that we have. But what we do have is the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab ratings for consumers. So the Virginia Tech originally started testing helmets for football because there wasn't anywhere that consumers could go to actually see how safe helmets were or not. We're kind of trusting manufacturers, and a lot of the sports have a pass-fail standard that they have to meet. So Virginia Tech was like, you know what, we can do better than that. So they have come up with sport-specific tests to test different helmets, and they looked at whitewater helmets a couple years ago.
I was really stoked they looked at whitewater helmets and very surprised at some of the responses when the research came out. It was actually kind of controversial. A lot of paddlers thought, oh, it doesn't really apply to me, or, oh, they don't really understand whitewater, or, oh, that was a different test, so it doesn't matter. And helmet manufacturers even seemed to just
have some big reactions.
They blew it off. They had some reactions. They blew it off.
Well, they questioned the test. And so we were just talking about it and thought there's a lot here that we could dig into. And that's so important to us. I mean, obviously I don't think anyone sets out to make helmets and doesn't want them to be safe. But at the same time, as consumers, we have to look out for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we decided to reach out to Virginia Tech to understand a little bit more about the tests that they run, why they chose whitewater helmets, and kind of what happens behind the scenes, so we could be a little bit more informed about their rating system.
And we got sweet protection on here. We have Ståle Møller, the founder and lead designer, who's also going to be joining us. And so this is going to be a really great conversation. And at the end, we're going to give you guys a framework that you can use to make decisions about what kind of helmet you need for when you're on the river. So get ready to nerd out about helmets.
Welcome to Crossing Currents. Today we are talking helmet safety and we're checking in with the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab. The lab has been testing helmets for over 15 years and provides a star rating to help consumers understand how helmets stack up when it comes to safety, especially in terms of preventing concussions. Joining us from the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab is Dr. Barry Miller. He is the Director of Outreach and he also has a PhD in biomechanics from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. He co-authored the Helmet Lab's peer-reviewed paper on whitewater helmet testing done at the lab. Barry Miller, we are so grateful to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So you smash helmets all day. Is that fun?
So we're actually a comprehensive injury biomechanics lab. Our bread and butter is certainly concussion research and helmet research. Basically, our background is injury biomechanics coming out of auto safety. The founders of the lab, Dr. Stefan Duma and Steve Rosen, were doing seatbelts and airbags, and they wanted to study head impacts in the real world. And Dr. Duma asked Frank Beamer, our football coach back then, can we use your football players as subjects? And they have to agree, etc. And they allowed us to put sensors inside their helmets. So we started collecting data on all this head impact because they hit their heads voluntarily all the time. Sometimes they get concussed. Most of the time they don't. And we just wanted to quantify what really happens inside the helmet. In doing so, one of the equipment guys, Lester, said, Steve, can you help me, pick the safest helmet? And Steve said, well, the only helmets we were using were, 2 models that our team used back then. And he goes, yeah, you know what? Maybe we should just buy all the commercially available helmets, run them through some tests and see what we get. Well, found huge differences between the best and the worst performing, even though they all passed the basic NOXI standard or certification, right, to be legally sold. And Steve said, well, this isn't information we should hold to ourselves. Everyone should have access to this kind of information. And hence the star rating system was born. And since then, now we have 10 sports and safety and construction helmet star ratings, and we're getting ready to launch a few more here shortly. So,
and that was back in 2011, right?
That's when we launched football. Yep.
Okay.
Varsity football for the first time. Correct.
And so you guys, I think I saw there's like 9 sports that you guys do. So hockey, equestrian, bicycle helmets, football,
soccer, flag football, snow sport, whitewater sport, cycling. What else did I miss? Yeah. So 9 or 10 sports and youth football.
So you guys are trusted by a lot of big industries, to be pretty much the gold standard for helmet safety, right?
Correct. Yeah, we're independent, so we're not biased by any technology or helmet company. We conduct the research just to inform consumers, number one. And then the second part of that is by giving manufacturers the test protocol, they can actually improve the helmets. It's the blueprint to improve the helmets. And if they improve helmets according to our test protocol, that really translates to the real world, because what we do is we figure out, how do you really hit your head kayaking? How do you hit your head if you fall off your horse? How do you hit your head playing football? We come back to the lab and try to create test protocols that are representative of those head impacts, real world head impacts, and also a test procedure that's repeatable, right? So those are the 2 critical pieces. If you're going to do something, it's got to represent what you're trying to do and then be repeatable on a regular basis, because we're comparing, company A to company B, and we're rank ordering them. It's just not pass fail. So we're doing is product differentiation, right? Some cars are safer than others. Some helmets are safer than others. And based on the test protocol, so that's basically what we do.
So you come up with the star rating. I know it's up to 5 stars, but do you rate anything a 0-star helmet?
That's a good question.
So let me explain the star ratings, just so everyone understands. So STAR is actually an acronym. It stands for the summation of tests for the analysis of risk. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to combine all these different tests into one overall number and then rank order them accordingly. So it works like this. So for whitewater, we figured out there's basically 3 locations and 2 energy levels that people hit their heads, right? So that's 6 test conditions. With me?
Yeah, so far.
Yeah, we're going to say test condition 1, we're going to say is front of the head, low energy. All right, so test condition 1. So we're going to do our test, our pendulum impact test. We're going to hit the head. We're going to grab the peak linear and peak rotation head acceleration numbers from that test. And that's going to determine what is our risk of concussion based on our bivariate risk function that has over 2 million data points.
Okay, wait, can you translate that? What's the risk of concussion based on how hard the helmet was hit, basically?
No, risk of concussion is based on, so we collect the data on our football players in helmet situations. That's based on over 2 million head impacts just from our lab alone. And so there's a probability.
Small data set.
Yeah, small, very small. So there's a probability of concussion based on those peak linear and rotational head acceleration numbers, right? So lower accelerations, low risk. Not zero, it's never zero. Almost zero, but never zero. So based on that number, we'll just say front of the head, we'll just say low energy, and you had 100 Gs of linear acceleration, and we'll say 3,000 radians per second squared of rotation acceleration. There's a formula that goes with this. So that's your risk of concussion number. So we'll just say overall, maybe it was 40% for that test. 40%, and then usually there's some sort of weighting factor or exposure value. Like, do you hit the front of your head, low energy more frequently than the other test conditions? Well, for Whitewater, we don't know because it's really hard to quantify actual. There's no video of people really hitting their head. No one's ever.
I'm going to solve that for you today.
Yeah. So we're going to give each of those test conditions an exposure value of 1 because from what we know, until we know it differently, the probability of all those 6 test conditions happening are about the same.
Right.
Unless we had, in football, we know low energy to the front of the head happens, 183 times more often than the other parts. But for Whitewater, we don't know. So risk of concussion times that exposure or weighting value, and for Whitewater, it's just 1, is going to give us what we call an incidence value for that test condition. With me?
Yes.
We do that for all 6 test conditions, and we summation of tests for the analysis of risk, sum all test conditions up, all incidence values, and that gives you an overall star score. So the star score represents concussion risk in some form or fashion, and you can't compare sports because they're different. But that's what it means. And so based on the star score, then we rank order you and place you into general bins. What's considered the 5-star, 4-star, 3-star.
And that's why the lower the number, the better, right? Because
correct, because it represents concussion risk.
Right.
We get that question a lot, and it's a fair question. But score versus the number of stars. And the only reason number of stars is just a quick assessment. Yeah, we want a 5-star. But if you really want to compare helmets, you probably look at the star score a little bit more carefully, more detailed.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
when people are looking on the website, each helmet is in a box, and there's the number of stars at the top, for example, 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, and then the star number is it's like 0.35 or something.
The star score, right? Number of stars and star score, right?
Yeah.
So you want a low star, kind of like golf. You want a low number to make the most money.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing a lot of people I don't think realize is that in the whitewater industry, you're right. There's not a lot of data for us in terms of injury data or any data really. But then on top of that, there's actually a lot of people don't realize there's no requirement for whitewater helmets to pass any sort of standard.
In the U.S.
In Europe, they at least have the CE EN 1385 standard, which is, it's a pretty low bar. It's like, needs to stay together if it's wet, needs to be able to handle a 15 joule impact, which for I think the layperson, what is that? Like sugar, a bag of flour or something dropped on your head from your waist or something?
Well, so I looked at this really quickly. So
okay.
The EN 1385 standard, the joule, I don't remember the joule energies, but it turns into a 12.5-inch drop.
Right. Which is
very minimal. It's the easiest certification out of all of them to pass. So 12.5-inch drop, and you have to be below 250 Gs. Skull fractures really start to happen at 250 or more. So sport helmet certifications, typically that is the threshold to pass, somewhere around the skull fracture, right? So it obviously depends on what kind of energy you're using to determine that, but it's got to be below 250 Gs. from a 12.5-inch drop. And that 12.5-inch drop gets you about 5.66 miles an hour. So 2.53 meters per second. So it's not a very
Yeah.
certification to pass. Our test, on the other hand, just for comparison, so we use 3.1 and 4.9 meters per second, low and high energy, which translate to about 7 miles an hour and about 11 miles an hour head impacts. We use 3 locations. And then, again, we're not pass-fail, so we're rank ordering the helmets. Whatever's commercially available, which ones are safer, which ones aren't safer. A little bit more robust test system than the certifications. And that's what we do, is we supplement the mandatory required certifications with real-world sport-specific helmet ratings. So the certifications, most of them are pretty good. They say, hey, if I wear this snow sport helmet or this bike helmet and I get into an accident, chances are I should not get a skull fracture or die.
Right. I mean, obviously, you want to be somewhat safe, right? Like
Exactly.
It's a pretty.
The next level of performance for a helmet is, can I not only pass the mandatory required certification, can I do well in the Virginia Tech helmet ratings, which is related to concussion risk, which can happen over a wide range of energies, right? You can't get a skull fracture at 10 Gs. It can't happen, right? So that's the difference. So the helmets all have to pass that, but can they additionally do well in our test protocol, which is based on concussion risk?
How did Whitewater helmets get on your radar?
Fair question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Brock Duma actually headed up this study, and I'm not sure. I think we just got a few questions, and this was a sport we could say, there's nothing out there. There's no requirement even. And this is something, we didn't have to spend a ton of research to do, and it was kind of pretty easy for us for this particular sport. And we thought it was just important to get out there because, unfortunately, and you guys know this, there's more deaths per participation hour in whitewater sports than anything else. And the reason for that is you hit your head, you get knocked out, and you drown.
It's interesting because, and you're right. You're 100% right. I agree with you based on my time in the sport. American whitewater, they only list 5% of the deaths having a head injury at all. But I think they include flat water paddlers and recreational paddlers as well.
Maybe, yeah.
I think that's what happens. A lot of times all our data gets jumbled and kind of like squished together. And so it skews some of those results. Because the American Canoe Association, I don't know if you know this, they also, they did a similar survey of like 500 participants. And I think it was like 48% had a head injury at some point, head or neck injury.
Yeah.
I mean,
This is
it's just
more, I don't
wild
know.
to me. I mean, I'm a happy class 3 paddler. I mean, my helmet is pretty chewed up after 4 years. Just sometimes you flip or you need to roll and there's just a rock right there. So I feel like we're kind of a high impact sport. You said it was kind of easy for you guys with whitewater helmets. What do you mean? Like, because there wasn't a standard or there wasn't a lot of testing out there? What do you mean by that?
Probably is just not as involved as like for football. There's tons of scrutiny. They hit their heads all the time, right? And so we really got to map out what locations, how you weight them, based on the total number of people that are participating, the scrutiny of the sport with concussions, things like that. People are just going out there wearing helmets, and there's no requirement. So
And the data doesn't even always match. Like it's hard to get any real information about it other than anecdotal information, right? Like I've seen a lot of people hit their heads. I've hit my head. I've been knocked out and paralyzed, and I've been concussed, and I've had staples and stitches and all kinds of things, right? Like, but it's all anecdotal. I don't think it's in a data set anywhere.
Right. So exactly. So that we couldn't quantify, so people hit their heads all the time in your sport, but there's no video. There's no way for us to really quantify exactly what angle, what location, so we just have to go with some basic information that I wouldn't say assume, but can extrapolate from whatever data we do have, whatever information we do have, and say, all right, this is a fairly robust 3 locations, 2 energy levels, low and high, and go with it until further data appears. Then we can modify, of course, but
right.
And also I looked in the research that you guys put out. There were a couple of studies that you cited. There were some surveys, like people had been surveyed about the head injuries they had. And then there was, I think the University of Colorado put out a study about injuries. So there is a couple people are looking at this, but we could certainly use more data. Is there any way that we as paddlers could contribute? I mean, I think people in the paddling community, just like any sport, we want to keep ourselves safe. I mean, we're hearing from you, and also just the fact that there isn't a lot of research out there. Is there anything that we can do to help?
More injury data is better. I mean, it takes a good number of studies for us to actually modify the test protocol, but we're happy to. I mean, we're data driven, so yeah, we're not like the certifications. We're pretty nimble and flexible. We can modify the test protocol or change the weighting values. For example, if everyone's getting hit at low energy, then we can weight that a little bit more because it happens more frequently in the real world. We could do that if we had that information.
But I'm asking, I guess, like, what would that data look like? Would it be us like answering surveys? If a university is putting out like, hey, how did you guys hit your heads? Is it like wearing sensors and helmets? How can we get you that data?
Yeah, sensors and helmets, that's tricky though. Especially in a whitewater sport.
Yeah.
Real world data is the best. And that's what we have. Football was awesome because we could actually put sensors inside their helmet. We videotaped every practice, every game. So we knew exactly what happened on, XY second to the second. Like, oh, that was a head impact. Where was it? Helmet to helmet, helmet to ground. What was it? What are the force? What are the acceleration numbers? And we put that in a big spreadsheet and we can analyze all this.
Can we do that in Whitewater? Like, I don't know. I mean, obviously the sensors would have to, like, someone would have to pay for it and the sensors would have to withstand the water, but
I think that...
Do you hit your head? Like, we want you to hit your head, but we don't want you to hit your head.
Right. The crazy thing though is, right, like as much as we would want that data, what I heard when the study came out and when all the testing came out, kayakers didn't want to believe it. There was actually, like, not all of them, but there was a pretty good sized group of paddlers that just seemed to resist. They were just like,
the results or the fact that we hit our heads?
The results. I remember vividly, like the moment they were posted, there was a range of comments, and I don't know if you guys ever saw that feedback. But
we saw some of it because you responded to some of it.
Well, yeah, for sure.
I can't remember.
I think so.
I usually get the blunt of it.
Yeah, I would imagine so, right? But it kind of blew my mind. In my mind, I was just immediately happy that somebody took our industry seriously. I was like, wait a minute, somebody tested Whitewater specific helmets. I've got to read this. And I was really excited and intrigued. But then I also watched people get really, kind of bent out of shape saying, well, this isn't practical for our sport, or it's not practical testing. I like what I have, or, I don't really think that's representative of real world whitewater environments. But the strange thing is your testing was more rigorous than the other testing. So it's almost like they want to be less protected.
The rank order of the results that the helmets somewhere.
They just came up with reasons. Some paddlers said, they didn't test hitting on top of your head, or they used, they talked about the type of testing that you did, but then they also wondered about, are those hits kind of practical for our sport? And what's strange to me, though, is that they were trusting the CE, your European CE standard, over your test, which to me is like way more rigorous. I want my helmet tested by you guys. Yeah, I want to know my head's okay.
No affiliation, but I'm trusting you guys, like, for your rankings. Just
well, any high performing helmet in our test protocol would easily pass that EN certification. I don't know, but it looks like the bottom of the list. I don't know about the one. I'd have to look at the data, but
right,
250 Gs. They might be. I mean, but we don't test it 12 and a half inch drop. And the other thing we include, which is really important for people to understand, we include both linear and rotational head accelerations,
which I love. I think that's amazing.
Both contribute to brain injury risk. It's just not linear.
Right.
All right, we've got two scientists. I've got that political science degree. Political science is a science. But can you please explain the difference between rotational and linear acceleration in like the simplest, most layman terms, please?
So I hit my head.
Thank you.
I can move on the X, the Y, and the Z axis, right? 3 planes. But I also have rotations about those axes. When I hit my head here, I can rotate here, but I can also flip. Right? I can go forward and back. So there's rotations about all those axes too. And as your brain tries to maintain its position inside your skull, that's what causes injury. So sometimes it's the pressure from linear movements, but the rotational ones cause stress and strain on parts of your brain tissue. And so you want to minimize all of that. And so the helmets that absorb more energy reduce those head accelerations, both linear and rotational, and obviously then subsequently reduce injury risk, right? So it's like, anything else, the more padding is probably better. Like when you hit your head on your pillow at night, well, your pillow's nice and soft. What if it was a mattress? Be a little harder. It'd be good for high energy, but not low energy, like he said. So, yeah. So, that's important that we include rotational head kinematics, the movement of your head rotationally, because that's related to injury risk as well, not just linear. The only reason why they use linear is because that's skull fracture. You don't fracture your skull with rotational movements. Just it's really the linear.
But it can be worse in some ways, right? Like, I mean, not say worse. Skull fracture is bad, but like,
Yes.
I had a rotational injury that caused me to be paralyzed temporarily, thankfully, from the neck down, because I took a hit to the side on my head, and it was just
yeah. There's some literature that kind of leads us that way, that the rotational values are more critical to concussion risk than the linear. It's not completely so we weight them equally right now, but you're probably right. Rotational is probably more important to minimize that. And then it's sometimes a challenge for helmets to reduce both.
Right.
I have some questions about the actual testing. So can you tell us where, your lab purchases the helmets, or do manufacturers send you the helmets that you test?
So we have kind of a two-pronged approach. So we acquire helmets on the open market commercially, just like anybody else. We test, rate, and post to the website. But we also want to work with manufacturers to help improve their helmets. So they can send them to us, and they have two options. So, and sometimes these overlap. So if they pay for the testing, we give them comprehensive data sets. We go over the results with them, usually with their engineers, to say, this is where it's good, this is where it's bad, this is what I would try, da da da. And if they want complimentary, then we automatically post that to the website, because we can't do what we do for free. It's expensive and etc. So combination of those two things. So commercially acquired just like anybody else, or companies reach out.
Did any whitewater manufacturers take you up on that? Have any of them reached out to you guys?
I can't remember. That was a long time ago. Yeah. Usually when we first launch the starter ratings, we just go out and get them.
Right.
And then post results, people are like, oh man, why are our helmets so bad? And then we, all right, here's the test results, etc. So
I guess that was the question I was getting to earlier, was that I've just never, I was really surprised that manufacturers joined in some of the resistance of the results.
And criticism.
And criticism of the results. Like, do you run into that with other industries, or is that just
the only design criteria they have before we launch a star rating is to pass the certification.
Right. Mm-hmm. And they're not even actually required to do that
in the U.S.
In the U.S.
Right. But if they do pass it, they might even say, I passed it with flying colors. But again, that is linear acceleration only. Mm-hmm. And it's from a 12.5-inch drop. Like, well, what is that protecting you from?
Right.
So, but yeah, to their defense, that's all they had to go by until we show up and say, here's what we think is representative of a whitewater accident. Here's how we're going to test them. We're going to rate them. We supplement the certifications with these real world scenarios. So.
You said that when you launched Whitewater, do you guys retest new models? So let's say a helmet brand comes out with a new model. When does that get tested?
So all of our star ratings are done on a rolling basis. So as new helmet models come out, we test, rate, and post to the website. So be sure to refresh your browser to make sure you're getting the latest pages. Often, most of the manufacturers now want to send it to us before they launch commercially, because they want a 4 or 5-star rated helmet. They don't want to launch a 2-star because people don't buy it, because a lot of people are using our webpage to.
Yeah, and I mean, in other sports, those manufacturers want your certification on their box. They are
logo.
Yeah,
and so that's called the no fee licensing agreement. So they can use those complimentary. So they sign an agreement with us. And, whatever's on our webpage, they can actually use our official logos for hang tags and packaging materials, digital marketing. So they're allowed to do that. And it's good for the consumer. It's good for us. It's good for them. Hey, people do value safer helmets, and let's just keep this circle from researchers to manufacturers to consumers to buy, safer products.
It's such a gift for anybody doing these sports because, otherwise, like I remember when I was younger, I would just go to the store, buy a helmet. And I'd be like, if they're selling it, it must be safe.
If it's on the shelf, it's safe.
If it's on the shelf, there's an assumption, right? Like there's an assumption that it should be safe, if it's there or.
I mean, or if my friend whom I trust and seems to be more experienced in the sport than me, then surely what they're using is trustworthy. But that's not always the case.
It's surprising, right? Like, so the manufacturer, and we talked to Sweet Helmets.
Sweet Protection?
Sweet Protection.
Yeah, we used to work with them quite a bit.
They had 5 of the top 6 helmets on your ratings, but then they also had one of the 1-star helmets, and I think it comes down to what they're made for.
Wait a second. You said you worked with them quite a bit. Do you remember what that looked like? Does that communication?
His name was Casey. One of the sales reps or one of the engineers, they were very interested in getting the helmets tested, approved, and improving them. And so I think sometimes, these companies, price points, like, all right, so what's this model for? The beginner? Or what's this one for? This one's for the tour guide.
Right.
Right? The back of the raft. So it depends on, maybe a 3-star is okay. That's their market. Maybe they don't want to compete with the top performing. If you're making Hondas, you don't want to compete with Ferrari, right? So it's a different market segment, right? So I think it matters. And I think they like to spread themselves throughout the ratings. Some companies anyways. Some just want to be top notch, and some are okay just selling the basic, certified helmet.
I like hearing when a manufacturer says, I want my helmet to be better. I like that. That encourages me a lot more than somebody saying, well, our helmet didn't test well, but it was just that day.
Or the test was wrong or something.
Or it must have been the test, and I don't feel safe with that, right? Like, I definitely want the ones that were more tested.
Can you just say one thing about the price range and the star rating? What do you want people to know about how price correlates?
We typically do not see a relationship between price and performance.
Did that surprise you when you started these tests?
A little bit, but when you look on the inside, when we do what we do all the time, it's like, well, you can get the thicker foam. I mean, just because it's thicker doesn't mean it's more expensive. But, you start getting low profile and lots of ventilation, fancy, styling. Well, that's not necessarily great for impact performance, and that drives price up, right?
Right.
And foam is not expensive.
Yeah, so I thought I would share some video with you. I thought I'd share some actual footage of actual real-life crashes.
That's the kind of stuff we need.
I thought you might want that.
Yeah, so we can quantify things from video, especially, we know that with the film speed is, or the video recording speed, we can, with some advanced computational things, we can actually figure some things out. So those are helpful.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, I'm happy to share any video that I have with you guys. I've hit my head a lot, unfortunately. The first one I'm going to share with you is me.
Okay.
Yeah, I has not seen this yet. So this is going to be fun.
I have heard about some of the impacts, but I have not actually seen this.
Yeah, I think this is going to be really fun. I'm going to share this just like this. All right. So this is just me running some slides.
Can you see that?
Can you see it?
Yep, I can see it.
All right, perfect. So I was minding my own business.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not going to lie, that hurt really badly.
We can't even tell what happened though. We don't. So it'd almost be better if someone is videotaping you. You came down to see what happened, because what you're seeing, we don't know how you hit your head or anything.
I caught an edge on a little shelf, going at Mach speeds, and so it just kicked my boat and my body straight into a rock shelf.
So that's what you hit right there.
That's what I hit right there.
Kind of knocked the breath out of me. Kind of knocked the wind out of me. I was happy that my head didn't take the main impact.
I'm glad you're okay.
On that one, that was one where, but I mean, I'm going really fast. It's a very tall slide.
Oh, drop. Yeah.
Yeah, and play it one more time just for fun for those at home.
Oh.
But it was a huge hit.
But what I'm hearing from you, Barry, is that you want Carnage Reel from a third perspective.
A third perspective.
There is so much of in our community.
The good news is I have some of that for you too. This is just a Carnage Reel this is a few clips that I pulled off of YouTube. But this is just kind of what happens in our sport.
Barry's got a serious face on.
It's a knockout.
Yeah. Scary.
Really scary stuff.
Jeez. Oh, no.
I've seen this a lot. I've seen.
No, thank you. No, thank you. The boat in the face.
Nice
paddle
gash.
in the face.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. These are fairly commonly run rivers.
Nope.
That was a shallow rock shelf he landed on, by the way. This might be a little outlier, but it was too good not to share. This is a terrible situation, but a lot of times we do end up going under rocks, and I've experienced that myself. It's terrifying.
Oh, no. Paddle to the face, boat to the face. Oh my God.
Catherine's cringing over here.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
She's not the only one.
oh my gosh.
It is.
Rocks don't give.
No. And then this is an example of that sweet strutter providing a pocket. I've been in this exact situation, penned underwater with more water, and just have a nice air pocket until you get rescued.
Oh, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Carnage, but what you're saying from the research side of things, you need like third person perspective, clear video.
Yeah. Those types of videos are helpful, especially with someone on the bank is filming it, so we can kind of quantify impact velocity.
Okay.
And Catherine, you had mentioned something about the test protocol, the pendulum impactor we use.
Yes.
So the EN certification, I think they use the ISO head form, 12 and a half inches. The helmet's in the ISO, so there's not much mass behind it. Drop it, boom. Well, that's probably not very realistic because there's a lot of mass behind your body when you get hit. So our pendulum impactor has the torso mass of a human, right? And then the impactor face, I think we use mushroom shaped kind of to represent a rock or a boulder that's somewhat smooth, but still it's kind of focal. And so it's different than a 12 and a half inch drop just with a head form and a helmet. So there's a lot more energy, which is representative of some of the things you just showed me. Like, I mean, they're bad impacts, right? So you want to be protected against that. You might not have gotten a skull fracture from any of those, but chances are, you have a concussion, and we want to reduce those, or reduce the severity. Maybe not eliminate, but reduce the severity if possible.
When you look at the requirements of that EN 1385 standard, does it make sense to you why someone set that?
The lowest out of all the sports certifications out there.
But do you think it was maybe for like recreational? I mean, it was set in Britain and then the European Union adopted it. But I'm just kind of wondering, like, where
did they get that?
Yeah, where did it come from?
Why I know where they get the 250 G number, because there's a skull fracture risk curve.
Right.
And after 250 Gs, your risk of skull fracture really almost goes up immediately. So that's where they get that number. Where they got the energy level for the drop or the velocity, which is basically the same thing, I don't know.
Okay.
So that's pretty minimal. 12 and a half inch drop, when I say 5 miles an hour is pretty minimal for some of the things you guys do. Maybe it's, flat water rafting. I don't know.
And I can dig more. I looked into
canoeing and not kayaking. I don't know.
Yeah. I looked into try to figure out what governing body that I could reach out to ask them about this, and I have not been able to figure out the bureaucratic contact for that yet. But stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's interesting is, a lot of people would say, okay, boy, that footage was, that's extreme kayaking only. That's what you do. That's what your friends do. That's not everybody. And it's true. That video represented probably 30% of the sport of whitewater kayaking. But the thing is, I've had a lot of those hits, and I have experienced a lot of those really high velocity crashes. I've had worse hits on class 3 and under. I've had harder hits, faster hits, And with my GPS on my watch, I've clocked myself going 13 miles an hour on class 3 and under.
Which should also be other great data for you guys if you had a video and you had someone's watch data, right?
And just casually cruising along in Whitewater, and you hit rocks or whatever, things happen. And the crazy thing is the lower end of the sport, I feel like they hit their heads the most. I feel like the people who are newer at the sport, the people who are learning,
Less boat control, less experience.
They're underwater more. They hit their head more. They're hitting rocks more. They're going off drops onto rocks more, right? Like at least we have to totally miss a line usually to hit something.
Yep.
But
that's kind of why we use two different energy levels, right?
Right.
So because they both happen. Yeah, we didn't have enough data to say that the lower energy happened more frequently, but you want a helmet that tests you or performs well in both scenarios.
Right. We don't necessarily also want a helmet that's, less safe, even though you don't plan to hit your head that hard.
Right.
Right. Like
you don't plan to get into a car accident either.
Exactly.
Do you ever, or do manufacturers ask you, okay, we've gone through your test, like, can you just like crank up the machine until our helmet breaks? Like, where is the limit? Like, or do you guys?
That's a good question.
You know what I mean? Like, you're testing for a low impact, like a bang, and then you're testing for like a concussion level impact, and then there's like skull fracture. But do you ever test like where the helmet's breaking limit actually is?
Not with a STAR testing protocol, because once
just
we
in the
establish
lab.
that's what we're evaluating the helmets against, is that what happens in those sports. When we do, developmental studies, yeah, we might crank it up, and it just depends on the density, thickness, shell material, shell thickness, like but a lot of the sports, single impact, almost all of them except football and maybe whitewater and hockey, I guess, they're all single impacts. So they're supposed to break apart. That's how they absorb energy. So it's a little different application. Not that a whitewater shouldn't crack and, deform to absorb more energy.
I've seen it happen.
But that's usually a good thing when it breaks.
Right.
Yeah. So
I've told everybody that I've seen helmets just fly apart. I've seen people take hits so bad that sweet rockers even just split. Yeah. And that helmet tested really well on the star rating. And
it's okay if they do, because if they don't deform at all, that means all that energy is getting transferred to your head.
Yeah,
exactly.
So a helmet cracking can be a good thing because it's the helmet.
I tell everybody that means it did its job. Move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell everybody, I think that the general rule is change your helmet every 3 to 5 years or every big hit.
Every big hit for sure is probably smart.
Yeah. Just go ahead, switch it out. I didn't change out my helmet after a big hit one time, and I got a worse concussion because I didn't. I know my helmet didn't do its job. And it was one of those things. But one of the other things that comes up, and it's interesting that you mentioned other sports and other helmets, that a lot of people look at these ratings, they take them so seriously, they say, well, I don't like the whitewater ratings. I'm going to go get a hockey helmet, or I'm going to go use a lacrosse helmet because they're tested to a different standard or a higher standard.
Or I have a bicycle helmet in my garage. I don't need to get a whitewater helmet.
Do you have any, can some of those helmets be safer, or is it? What do you think?
Absolutely, they can. Yeah. A lot of them can be very much safer, but it's application specific. So, but the top performing bike helmets are outstanding. Outstanding.
Do they take multiple impacts?
They don't. So they are single impact.
And also, do they because in whitewater you're submerged in water. Some helmets aren't tested for that environment, right?
That's true.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, you don't know what you don't know, but as far as the single impact goes, some of those bike helmets are outstanding.
What about helmet weight? So like lacrosse helmets, for example, they are way safer than whitewater helmets in terms of rigorous testing, but they weigh 3 times as much. It's 3 times the weight on your head. Is that?
Well, force equals mass times acceleration. So it really depends on the impact scenario. Usually a heavier helmet has more padding. So, which is usually advantageous, right?
Yeah.
And if it's heavier, it's usually got denser padding, which is probably advantageous for the higher energy impacts as well. So, I can't really answer the question.
It's fair.
But just keep those parameters. Like, heavier means more padding,
right?
Thicker shell, which is usually helpful, but you're also got more mass to your whole the energy system, but I would say a bigger helmet's usually safer.
I guess that was the part that I was wondering.
Yeah.
Is that extra swing weight, and I guess you're right. It is because you have more padding on your head, though. So it might be more torque on your neck, but maybe it's better.
So 13 miles an hour down the river, well, your head's moving 13 miles. You have more mass in that helmet that has 13 miles an hour. So, but I think in general, I would say that a bigger helmet has more padding and it's probably safer than a lighter helmet with less padding.
I feel like manufacturers would say you should use the helmet for what it's intended for. So I don't know,
Yes. Well, yeah, because
they will.
Sport specific, that's what we do with, sport specific. Not saying that, a lot of the certification standards, if you start looking at them all, you're like, awful similar. Whitewater might be out of the norm because they probably do multiple impacts and maybe do some submerged things.
There's definitely some submerged testing involved.
Yeah. And,
But
we don't have to do that since the certifications do that. We don't do the roll off test for the chin strap. If those are always, or a penetration test, I'm not sure if Whitewater has those. We don't need to repeat those since they already passed those, but
You guys don't do the direct impact to the top of the head, right? Because it's usually a drop test, or do you on the Whitewater helmets?
no, the problem with a crown test, usually we like to use a test rig that has a surrogate neck. So, because most humans have necks. So,
all of us, yeah.
Right?
For sure.
I haven't seen anybody without one, but most of us have them. When we use the surrogate neck, when you load the Z-axis on that surrogate neck, we get really unrealistic results because it absorbs energy, the rebound, so they're not accurate. And so we try to avoid that. That's one reason why. And typically people don't hit the top of their heads. They hit the other locations. It's really hard to hit the top of your head. I mean, usually it's some sort of, front boss side. Not maybe you guys do it more frequently, but
yeah, I've seen it happen where I've seen 2 helmets shattered from the top, direct impacts, just picked up and slammed by waves.
And if the padding material is the same, right?
On the sides.
Around the entire helmet and the crown, it'll probably perform the same regardless of location for the most part. Right? So same thickness, locate, certain
So
parts.
where you're testing, it should be relatively the same everywhere if it's manufactured that way.
Yeah. But I will say, impacts to the side of your head tend to have higher concussion rates. Where I think we're just more vulnerable based on the way our head's shaped and the way our brain is inside. Side impacts, we're just not good at. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I just want to ask one more time, just so I'm clear. If someone wanted to wear a hockey helmet or a snowboarding helmet kayaking because they're heavier or they have more padding or those standards seem higher, what would you say to that versus a 5-star rated kayaking helmet?
Well, knowing that the EN certification isn't much, right? So I'm hesitant to say it needs to be at least that because I know a decent helmet will pass that easily. Yeah, it's hard for me not to say wear a high-performing Virginia Tech rated helmet would be probably safer than a crappy helmet.
Well, yes,
I agree with that.
You look at a helmet on the inside, like I took my boys whitewater rafting, like the Gauley River and everything, and I laugh, so I brought them all helmets. They're in college, so I brought all the helmets. I said, we're going to wear these. We're not wearing what they. And you go to the
Good
bin,
for
they give
you.
this helmet, and I start laughing. I go, really? This is what you're going to give these guys? And then I look at the guide on the back of the boat. I go, well, why doesn't everyone wear what you got on? And they all go, well, I need to be protected. I'm like, exactly. I go, so because I'm more important than the rest of you. I go, true. Because if he goes down or she goes down on the back, we're all toast, right? We have no guide, no one to guide us. So,
but I'm saying, like, if you have a couple 5-star rated, like Virginia Tech Helmet Lab 5-star rated helmets for whitewater kayaking, and then you have 5-star rated helmets for, let's say, hockey. Do you think it's a good idea to, do you think it's safer to wear the hockey helmet because the standards, you know what I mean?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't even tell you which one is safer because they get tested differently.
Yes.
If we tested them both through both protocols, I could give you the answer for that model.
That would
I
be
could say,
interesting.
we did all these whitewater helmets. We tested them against the hockey protocol and vice versa. And then we'd have a mixed bag, all the results. We could say, well, these are the ones that reduce concussion risk.
If a bunch of consumers got together and said, hey, Virginia Tech, here's X amount of dollars. We really want to run these kayaking helmets through your protocols for other sports. How much would that cost? And would you be willing to do it?
Oh,
We'd give you guys a deal for sure. But yeah, we could do that. It would be interesting. Really just depends on how many models, how many tests we do.
Like, let's talk. Let's talk.
I'll tell you like our basic protocol for a bike helmet is $3,000.
Okay,
So
that's
that's
not.
six locations, 2 energy levels, 2 trials. That's 24 total tests on our oblique drop tower. That's $3,000. When we do multiple models, you get discounts. Because once we're set up, it's easy just to keep rolling and start all over, get the data acquisition system. So one model is 3,000, 2 models is 4,750, 3 models is 7,000. But that's for full star test protocols.
right.
We could create a test matrix that maybe we don't need to do all locations, just to give you some basic information on what does it look like, right? And so we could do a modified version. And so it really depends on what the test matrix looks like and what test rigs we use.
I appreciate your can-do attitude. You guys are open to more data from paddlers and like doing testing, so I appreciate that.
And maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need just like good annual carnage reels so that these guys can have some data of head injuries. We'll just
or ask a hockey manufacturer, say, they would pass this EN certification easily.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so do you think that, we as an industry should look at a higher standard for Whitewater than that CE? Like how does that standard get pushed? How do we say we need more?
Yeah. I think you got to reach out to the governing board of that standard and say, these are not safe. This is not a realistic test. We need more. But yeah, the hockey helmets would pass that 12-inch drop easily because they get a high. Yeah, hockey helmets get tested almost like football helmets.
Right.
Well, I guess the other way to do it would be to test the kayaking helmets to the hockey helmet standards, right? That would be maybe a little more telling. I mean, again, might not be based on the research, because the research for each sport is based on numbers that you have.
But I think, if we're doing a 4.9 meter per second impact with the Whitewater, that's a pretty decent impact. So the hockey helmets go up to probably 5.3 or 5.4. I'd have to look.
And that would be what, about 10, 11 miles an hour? 10 miles an hour? So is it going to be
5 meters per second is about 11.
About 11. That's what I was thinking.
It starts to go up pretty quick when you get that momentum working. So,
okay.
Yeah, it might even be 5.7 meters. I'd have to look at the technical document, the protocol, but the hockey helmets would do really well. Yeah, because they already get tested at similar energy levels. So maybe back to your original question. Yeah, so maybe a high-performing hockey helmet would probably be really good.
It would be safer, probably.
And they have face masks, they have shields, they have guards. So,
but that's like
to recommend that.
I feel like every hockey and lacrosse wearing helmet in our industry feels vindicated right
now.
Maybe
they are. I don't know.
I think you should say, hey, hockey helmet companies, why don't you guys get your EN certification too? Because we would love, then liability wise for whoever needs that, say that I'm wearing a certified helmet. And there's a couple of the hockey helmets, the top performing ones are pretty good. So,
all right.
Well, another market segment for them, but if I was you guys, I'd be comfortable wearing a high performing hockey helmet in the water.
Well, you guys put so much time, energy, effort into all of this testing, all of this data, working for all of our sports. It's a service to all of us.
It's free. It's free
and
consumers.
It's free to us, which is amazing. How would you hope that our industry would respond based on what you've seen and what you've heard?
I hope they just use our test protocol to make the helmet safer. And you guys keep working at it. It's just the helmets will probably get a little bit bigger because you got to have room. So the room between your skull and the outer part of the helmet, we call that the offset. And so when you increase the offset, that's more padding, but it gives you opportunity to absorb energy, right?
Right.
Kind of like low profile tires in your car. They're kind of stiff. It's a bumpy ride, right? But you get more space, right? More space gives you more opportunity to absorb energy. So the helmets might get a little bit bigger, but for the most part, I mean, until they get, the bobblehead size, you guys don't have to worry about them catching more rocks or things. I understand being streamlined to some extent, but a little bit wider, we're talking what, a centimeter maybe? Yeah. All the way around. That's not much for a lot better protection.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely wouldn't complain about more protection.
And
I don't know many
do
people.
a lot
that
of you
do.
guys wear full shields like a hockey cage?
So I don't. I have a friend who she got a black eye. To me, it feels more like an entrapment risk. You know, I'm just more comfortable wearing. I wear a suite. This
is Catherine's helmet.
I feel solid in it.
What about visors? Could you guys wear visors? Would that be helpful or no?
A lot of people want them. A lot of people want more visor options because of the sun on the river.
I like visors when I'm instructing because of the sun, and I don't mind them then. But when I'm running waterfalls or when I'm in big water, I don't like the visors because you have to really duck your head down to block the water, and it gives water an opportunity to pull at your neck. It gives an opportunity for leverage, to get seriously hurt. There are people that swear by full face helmets.
They are. I know some. They love them.
And they love them. They go with them every time. They wear them all the time. The ACA survey, they did a survey. I think it was only 7% say they typically wear a full face. So it's not a very huge proportion of people. But I've also seen those full faces become snag hazards. We're like going in
That's what scares me.
and
That's what scares
wood
me.
and people like, you know, and then in the video clip that I showed you too, you know, the guy's wearing a full face, but the boat still hits underneath the full face. So it protects your teeth, but it doesn't really, I've seen a lot of broken noses and black eyes in those full faces. And then a cage some people like those too, but the snag hazards.
Cage would be a nice, I think the cage would be helpful because that protects you from a wide variety of things. And, you know, it protects your eyes from your nose. Yeah.
Quick
I
question.
block with my elbow and I wear elbow pads. And that actually,
a
lot of times it's, you know, because they can't go past my head. And so a lot of times I use that for myself. But other people really like to have that coverage.
Yeah. Elbow, forearm pads makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
A lot of people wear GoPro mounts on the top of their helmet. Does that impact helmet safety? I mean, I know it could be like a snag hazard, but like, does that impact helmet safety at all?
They typically break off pretty easily. So we haven't seen any attachments that really are firm enough. They are going to create a moment and grab the whole helmet. They just break off.
Yeah. How important is fit?
Fit. And this is what Mark and I say. He's our director of testing. We say fit is more for comfort than it is impact protection. Because when you get into an accident, you want the helmet to decouple from your head. That doesn't mean it has to come all the way off, but when I hit my head, I want the helmet to move a little independently before it takes my head with it. And that could be due to energy absorption and just allowing the helmet to move. So the more the helmet moves before it takes my head with it, as long as it stays in the general place to absorb impact, that's better.
Okay.
When it's so tight that it's coupled that whatever the helmet does, your head does, that's usually not as good as for impact performance. Kind of like your car.
Right.
You want a crumple zone in your car. The car moves independently before it moves you to drive. And we're still talking milliseconds. So.
And we're not talking a lot of movement, but we're talking you don't want to move it up and down.
So a little bit's good.
But
usually because then you hit your head, it slides up and that reduces a lot of the rotational head movements you have. So fit is more for comfort than it really is for impact. And a loose one probably performs better than a slightly tighter one because of what I just said.
Interesting. Yeah, because you need it. And the only catch that I see with that is I've seen some big goose eggs from poorly fit helmets that moved up a little bit. I've seen several hematomas.
Yeah. Again, it needs to stay in the general location, so it can't be that loose. But you don't want to pre-compress any padding either, being so.
But you don't want to get a headache either because your helmet's too tight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Football players, you can see the indentations of all the pads.
Exactly.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you really want folks in the whitewater community to just keep in mind when they're looking at the Virginia Tech helmet lab ratings?
I'm surprised you didn't ask about hair.
You know, I have hair.
Boyd
hair. It's up right now, but I'm interested in this.
I used to get that question a lot. How does hair affect impact performance?
Does it?
Well, hair is the natural slip plane. So it helps with the decoupling pretty naturally. So
I was about to say, I think that it would just help with that a little bit, right?
You got it. And a kind of wiggly scalp is good. The older you get, it's going to happen. You get some wrinkles.
I mean, does someone who's bald, I feel like that would, I mean, is there more friction or less friction?
Probably more friction if you're bald. Probably.
Interesting.
Unless you're, I mean, I guess there could be a water layer or some oily lubrication.
Slather on some sunscreen.
Suntan lotion. There you go.
For our balls kayaker friends.
So my hair is safer.
Yeah, hair is good. Hair's a natural slip plane. Hair works well. Yeah.
Well, when someone's looking at a helmet and it's on the shelf and they think it looks like a good helmet, in that moment, what do you recommend they do? Whip out their phone and go to Virginia Tech?
Yeah, so we're good at it because we see all the helmets, but obviously the thickness of the helmet, and when you press on it, I don't have any Whitewater right here in my office, but when you press on it, if it's so stiff that it doesn't deform or absorb, then it's probably too stiff. That means all the energy is going to get transferred. So you want it a little bit compliant, right? So you got to be able to, and if it's super thin, it's like, well, that's not going to do a whole.
The foam or the shell? You're talking about the foam, right?
Foam, yeah.
Yeah.
The shell, you're probably not going to be able to tell, but and there's advantages and disadvantages based on like a Kevlar shell versus a plastic shell that's a little bit more compliant. It's really the relationship what's inside the helmet and outside the helmet. So I can't say Kevlar is bad because sometimes it might be good, depending on both of those things.
Right. Yeah, so it's really situational. It really comes down to
the whole helmet model. How does the whole thing perform under a couple different scenarios?
I mean, I would rather have a lab using scientifically calibrated tools testing helmets than trying to just press on foam in a store. But you do what you got to do.
Yeah, we do use calibrated tools. Thanks for pointing that out.
It's true.
Science. I'm a fan. Dr. Barry Miller from the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab. It's just been lovely spending this time with you. Thank you so much. I feel like I've learned quite
you guys are welcome. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, if you guys have follow-up questions or if your listeners have questions, my email's on the website, bmiller21@vt.edu. Happy to answer questions. We're here to educate and inform so you guys can make the best decisions when buying a helmet. Keep you guys safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
I really appreciate it.
The Whitewater community is grateful.
Thanks.
It's such
happy to help wherever we can.
All right, guys, we've got to give a quick break because I want to give a shout out to one of my sponsors, Hiko. Hiko Sport has finally started selling in the United States. And guys, I've been using their gear for over a year and I've been so impressed. It's dry. I'm still dry. Even from Canada down to Chile, it has been holding up through some thorough abuse and very wet days. But I've stayed dry. All right, guys, we are here with Ståle Møller with Sweet Protection. He is the founder and head designer, lead design for all of their helmets. And so we're really honored to have him here today. We're really excited. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And just so we get it right, can you please tell us how to pronounce your name correctly and forgiving us for our accents?
It's pronounced Ståle Møller.
Ståle.
The Norwegian name.
Can you tell us day to day what you do at Sweet?
I'm responsible for design, engineering, innovation at Sweet Protection with a growing crew of very talented designers. So I'm very fortunate to work with some very talented people. So I started making helmets in my parents' garage in the 90s and haven't really been able to find a real job since.
And you guys, you were skateboarding initially, right?
Yeah, the story kind of starts in I would say mid 80s. Like Norway was the only country in the world where skateboarding was completely banned. It was illegal to own, operate.
It was banned.
Yes.
I didn't know
completely
that.
Forbidden.
Wow.
Only country in the world. And then we watched this movie, Thrashin', Back to the Future. And Sweet Protection was basically started by a group of friends that were kind of really not into anything that had to do with coaches, benches, and game time. So skateboarding really spoke to us. And we started making skateboards in my parents' garage. And then we had to kind of smuggle in trucks, wheels, and Thrasher magazine and transfer skateboarding from Sweden.
Contraband.
Yes.
How did you get from there to helmets?
Whitewater kayaking was the closest we can get to Pacific surf. Where we grew up is really far from the ocean, but we have really good rivers here. A friend of mine, one of the founders, moved to Trysil to go to high school, and he was into whitewater kayaking. And that was the next big thing.
I really relate to that. I grew up away from the ocean and I wanted to be a surfer really badly. I love the ocean, but because I was closer to rivers, I got into kayaking.
Yeah.
Similar thing.
And that was something that really did full time and traveled the world. And we even made some kayaks of our own, tried to make better planing hulls and so on. And then I think protection became like a natural part of what you do. I think like many of these sports, like taking care of yourself and taking care of one another is something that's pretty important.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize that, that wasn't that long ago, really. And we didn't have really good quality helmets. Some of that specialized equipment was really new in like the late 90s, early 2000s, right?
Yeah, pretty new back then.
So you design helmets. So the first time you wore your first prototype, were you like, let's just see what happens? Or like, were you confident in those early designs? Like, what did that feel like?
Well, we started out really small, and then we started with whitewater kayaking helmets because we had unique insight to the sport and we kind of knew what was required, and it was summer. And then the next season we went into skiing and snowboarding because that's basically what we do during the winter. And there as well, we had some unique insights, and we kind of made some helmets and people seemed to like them. And then the reason why we started Sweet Protection back in the days is that we want to make sure that we made the best possible gear for everything for things that we have an insight into and really could have the potential to create something that really suits the need of athletes. And it kind of grew from there, and now we're into ski racing, free ride, road biking, mountain biking, and of course whitewater kayaking. All of our designers, they're not only really good industrial designers, but they're all into the different areas. So you're a road biker and you're a designer, so you can really understand what the requirements are. So that makes us a little bit special.
What's your go-to helmet when you're paddling?
For afternoon playboating, I use a strutter, and for weekend bigger adventures, I would go in the rocker.
The regular or the full face?
The regular.
Is there a way that you guys test those helmets in-house?
Yes, we do all the prototyping and all the engineering in-house, and then we proceed to make the first set of tooling, and then we always do a very extensive in-house testing at our own labs. Of course, all helmets are as well tested external. It's a pretty long process to make sure that every detail is up to our standards.
That external process, I know with PFDs, when I was with Stolquist, we had to pay, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Coast Guard to have a PFD approved. And for every little change on a PFD, we would have to resubmit it again. And it was always this big thing, this cost benefit of, we really want to change to this different fabric, but then we have to pay all of this money. Will we ever get it back?
It's pretty much the same. You have to manufacture according to certification and your own internal performance requirement. And if you change anything, you have to recertify. You have to double and triple check any revisions that you do. But the goal is always to make sure that it's kind of perfect when it goes into production.
Is it costly?
Yes.
Yeah.
We put a lot of time and effort into our R&D.
I just don't think people realize how much these different certification process cost and how much it can really demand of manufacturers, right? Like Whitewater is probably not a very big part of your sales, right?
It's not the biggest part of our business, but it's very close to our hearts.
Well, right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think when it comes to quality, you always have to test throughout the different batches and the production process to make sure that everything is up to the standards.
Especially with helmets, they're so, obviously our heads are so important. Can we just back up for a second? What makes a good whitewater helmet? Like when you're at the starting point for designing, what kind of features are you and your team thinking about that you really want to make sure are going to be in that final product?
Whitewater is a little bit different to the other products that we're making for different sports. I think what makes Whitewater unique is, first of all, you have to create a product that can withstand a lot of abuse. It's going to be wet most of the time. You're going to travel a lot. You're going to throw it into the back of a truck. It needs to be super durable. So our whitewater helmets would be like the most durable helmets that we make. Another thing is that they need to perform after being submerged for a long time. So we always work with different materials in whitewater than we would use, for instance, in a bike helmet. And also the impact forces are, let's say, lower than it would be for mountain bike racing. But still, we need to get the most out of the shock absorbing material. But since it's in a different environment, it's always different than, let's say, in a mountain bike helmet. And then it's kind of a real world use. There's all kinds of consideration, and we also make kind of specialized whitewater products. So let's say for the Strutter, which was our very first helmet, it's a low volume helmet for like playboating, big water use. And there it's designed to, of course, be extremely durable, very lightweight and low volume, but also has it's kind of like a baseball cap, so you have that protection from the sun. And as well, everyone with the Strutter, they learn how to duck into waves, so you don't get blinded by the pressure of the water. So that's kind of specialized in that direction. And a helmet for like the rocker, which is kind of designed for more extreme use. It's thicker. It has a higher degree of protection, but also there it has air pads, so you can protect your ears better from surface ears, so you don't get directly cold water splashes into your ears. And also more kind of over-engineered fit system and retention system to the helmet. But I think what makes whitewater helmets unique as well is that they need to be incredibly stable because of the force from the water. So it's unique kind of approach to designing a helmet. So our whitewater helmets doesn't share any of the components with any of our other helmets. So they're especially designed for different types of whitewater kayaking.
So your helmets have a range in price, like 130 might be the lower end, and then I'm not sure, I forget which one I was looking at. It might be like a mountain biking helmet. It's like $700.
Oh, we were looking at the snowboarding helmets.
Oh, so can you
Yeah.
just like explain, like, is it just the materials? Like, what goes into those much higher priced helmets?
Our most expensive helmets would be for like ski racing and mountain bike racing. And there the whole shell is made out of pre-preg carbon fibers, different types of carbon fiber, making sure that we have the exact amount of properties, and the difference between elasticity and rigidity will vary throughout the whole surface of the helmet shell, because our heads have a pretty difficult geometry. So some areas you want to be a little bit elastic, while some areas you want it to be pretty rigid. So it's a lot of different layers in order to get those exact properties, and they're all handmade, and then all made out of pre-preg material. So it's a pretty expensive process, but then you would get the best possible properties in your helmet shell. And then again, the liner has different densities depending on where it is, that you have as a light and strong helmet as possible. So it's very much down to the production process and what kind of requirements that you need to meet. And all our racing product needs to meet additional standards than, let's say, a standard snowboarding helmet or a standard mountain bike helmet, to make sure that it's fit for use in terms of World Cup racing.
And a lot of those costs were probably also not just materials, but also would those costs be from different testing that you have to do or different certifications that you have to pay for that helmet? And
yeah, there's additional standards all the way that they have to meet. So our ski racing helmet needs to meet 3 different standards, and the same with mountain bike racing, also have to meet standard bicycle helmets in the different markets, plus a particular downhill racing standard.
I mean, that's a
So
lot.
there's more time and effort into design and development and testing, and also very expensive materials being used in those helmets.
As a multi-sport helmet manufacturer, is there a drawback for a kayaker choosing a helmet from a different sport that it may not be designed for
People are
that
wearing
immediately comes to mind?
like ski helmets or lacrosse helmets on the river instead of whitewater helmets because I think they're safer.
Or if they grabbed a snowboarding helmet, right? Like,
What's your take on that?
I would always choose a helmet that's specifically designed for the activity that you're gonna do, because there are very particular requirements for each and every sport that we try to design helmets for. So I think you'll be that's you always pick a helmet especially designed for the sport that you're gonna do.
All right, so the Virginia Tech test when it came out, you guys scored sweet, and I was really excited because I also, I mean, I wear sweet. I was really relieved and excited to see that you guys scored, the top 5 out of 6 positions on the Virginia Tech tests. I was kind of surprised when I talked to the public and when I saw people posting about it and when I interacted and engaged with people, there was a mix of perceptions and a mix of emotions about the test. There were,
Right.
a lot of people were like, oh, that doesn't really represent whitewater paddling. There's no way they disagreed with the method of the test. What did you guys think about it? What was your first thought when you saw the testing come out?
No, I would say first and foremost, I would welcome any type of research and test protocol that tests helmets. There's always something to learn from it. And of course, I was really happy that we did well. And when we designed the Wanderer and the Rocker, we really wanted to create something that was designed for how whitewater kayaking has developed. And I was happy to see that Virginia Tech seemed to agree. So I would welcome any type of research and test protocols that goes into the different areas of sport.
You had one helmet, the Strutter, it did not test as well. I think it got 1 star. What did you think when you saw those results? Like, did that surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me. I think the Rocker and the Wanderer is kind of our 2 latest helmets, which is based on a lot of the research that we put into mountain biking and skiing and so on and so forth. The Strutter is a low volume helmet, which was and that's how we kind of market it as well. It's a playboat and kind of like a big water helmet. So no, I was not surprised.
I owned a Strutter for a while, and I'd noticed I always had to duck the bill down when I was hitting bigger water. But it was
Right.
great for the sun. And if I were going to pick a helmet to go instruct on the Ottawa for a little while, that's a great choice because of the bill. And I know several people too have been in vertical pins where just having that bill there has actually given them an air pocket
Right,
that they might not have realized they had before. So it actually has some benefits.
Yeah, it's basically inspired by a very functional piece of headwear.
So when people see that, they see that 1 star and they're like, "Oh, wait a second." I mean, from what you're saying, I feel like you would tell people to think about like where you're using it. So if you're playboating, surfing, you might not be having as a risk of as hard impacts. Is that what you would recommend the use for that helmet for?
Well, I would definitely recommend if you're going to go off waterfalls and being very exposed areas, I would recommend the Rocker or the Wonder.
So the best environment for the Strutter is big water, not as high impact?
If you're going to be instructing the whole summer and it's big water or deep water, I feel like there's like a keeping your environment and your needs, like cancer is also dangerous. So the brim is really nice, the lightweight is really nice. There's like real benefits to having that low profile design, right?
Yes.
It's a real good time to have it.
Yep. So it depends on end use really, what kind of kayaking you're gonna do.
I looked at it as an extra test that informed manufacturers on how their product might perform, like how it might work in a real hit kind of environment, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And a lot of manufacturers that we've talked to would rather, they kind of get defensive about it. They're like, no, that test is not a very credible test. And it's like, well, it's peer reviewed. Do you feel like their testing was good quality? You know what I mean?
Fair, like was it representative of what?
Representative.
I mean, just from your side.
I think it was very well documented, their thinking behind the test protocol and their approach to how to test. And I think whatever Virginia Tech publishes is always very interesting.
I was just happy they chose Whitewater. I was like, oh, somebody's acknowledging that we exist. I was really excited
Yes.
about it as an industry, right? Like,
Yeah.
I would imagine that you looked at the tests that they performed. How did those tests compare to what you guys do internally? Like, were you like, oh, these are the same, we are looking at the same parts of the helmet that are hitting, like we're applying the same kind of force. Like, how do your internal tests compare to the tests that they did? Do you know?
Our internal testing is a little bit different because it's mostly based on the EN 1385 way to test the helmet, where you drop the helmet with the head inside, and you also test after artificial aging after being submerged for 24 hours. So it's a slightly different test, but there again we measure what kind of forces you're left with, basically. And that has to be well within the threshold that the norm says, basically. Slightly different to the Virginia Tech test protocol.
as the sport is developed, do you think that there's a reason to bump up that testing from, I mean, I think the requirement is only 15 joules of impact, right? So do you think that there's room to kind of look at the whitewater test and think about down the road, we need to test to a higher standard?
Yeah, I would say I would welcome any research that's being performed on increasing the safety of our sport. I would welcome.
So when you're doing your tests, you are kind of or like you're aiming towards that 1385 standard. So if they change that standard, you would change your designs. Is that fair to say?
It depends on the test protocol. We have to meet the EN 1385 standard.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the way the Whitewater standard is at this point. But then, of course, we try to design our helmets with the best performance possible, depending on the end use, basically, and then also make sure that we meet all the other requirements that you would know if you're into whitewater kayaking, such as stability and durability and coverage for the sun and all of these things.
So you're thinking about the features for the consumer.
Yeah, in addition to meeting all requirements, it also have to be a comfortable helmet. It needs to make sure that it works with the rest of your gear. It can't interfere with your kayaking. You have all these additional features that one can appreciate if you spend a lot of time on the river.
Yeah.
And knowing the abuse of whitewater kayaking, I think, is important as well.
That's the part that, I guess that's the part that surprises me, because I think about the kayakers are so hard on gear.
Yes.
Kayakers are hard on everything. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, I feel like it's the hardest. I've done a lot of different extreme sports and a lot of different high adventure sports. And I feel like of all of them, the sport that takes care of things the least is probably kayakers.
Yeah, the nature is you always travel.
For sure.
You always have to pack things. It always gets wet. And very rarely it gets completely dry before the next trip.
Exactly.
And it's kind of the way it is. And
I
it's
was-
really hard wearing. There's it's a hard wearing sport, basically.
I was feeling my helmet in Chile and it started to get almost slimy because it was just hadn't dried. There just hadn't been
Yeah.
a moment where it had dried for any length of I washed it. I was like, okay, I've got to wash this thing. It's got sweat and river water and it's not dry.
Smells
And,
great.
And I would say, like, especially helmet, I think it's really important to try to take care of it and also make sure that it's as clean as possible, because then it's more comfortable to wear, and also make sure that like everything is complete, so there's nothing torn or stuff missing and so on. So I think that's for any sport, it's important to kind of go over your safety gear from time to time.
Yeah.
I agree with that
Maybe
completely.
check your throw bag as well.
Yeah, for sure. Carabiners.
The age of your slings.
I was on the river one day and somebody had pinned a boat and everybody was getting out their pin kits and somebody pulled out one and everything was all crusted together and I was like, when was the last time you opened that thing?
Yeah.
You know,
It's from time to time, maybe take out the whole rope and dry the whole thing and
Yeah.
check the condition of stuff. It's
absolutely.
important.
So I did a poll And I was asking kayakers, all right, so what is the most important feature? What's the most important decision-making criteria you use when you buy a helmet? Overwhelmingly on every platform, fit was actually the number one thing. All right, does it fit? I agree with that. Helmet can't work unless it fits really well, even if it were to test really well. And
Yeah,
so
and if you have a comfortable helmet, you're gonna always wear it.
one of the things they came up with that was all these bigger headed guys, and in America we've got some big heads here. I fit fine. I wear medium, but and they just didn't feel like they could fit the Rocker Wanderer even on the extra large size. They just said it's too small, so they have to go use another company, even though they'd rather use yours because they wish they had that size. Do you guys see a pathway down the road to potentially making a larger size?
We have received the same comments. That's something we're considering to see if we can work on see what we can do in the future.
It came up so much. I was just kind of
But
surprised. I was like,
people want it.
there are actually a surprising number of people who, just want a suite, but they can't wear one because their heads don't fit. They're
That's
just big.
yeah, that's very interesting. That's something we have to take into consideration.
It came up a lot. Like it wasn't just a few
Yeah.
comments. It was on every platform.
Well, speaking of features for helmets, so I have mine. I love it. I have not made any modifications. I need to get a new one soon. Boyd has changed one thing about his, and I'm just really curious what your take is.
All right, so this does relate to fit. So this piece that goes right here, the little plastic piece that goes under, a lot of us have found that we need to cut it out for waterfalls. And the reason is because it slices eyebrows.
Right.
So I do a little incision, pull it out, sew it back. And I'm not the only one. And I would imagine I would imagine that you guys would be like, hey, stop modifying our helmet. We can't guarantee anything there.
What's
But
your
what
take on
is that piece? And
What's it for?
No, basically you should not modify a helmet. We clearly state that in the user manual. And it's basically there to provide extra coverage and also make sure that you get, especially now in the spring, where you have like 2 degrees in the water, it will kind of reduce that ice cream headache.
is there any way to use something that's a little bit softer or not as sharp?
I'll have to take that into consideration.
Thinking.
Yeah, I just asked because I've seen a lot of split eyebrows from them, and that's like it's the only complaint that I have on this helmet. I love this helmet. For those who were wondering, I'm not sponsored by Sweet. I buy them. I pay full price.
Well, speaking of
Yeah.
feedback in price, you guys have a
Yeah.
program where people can send their a helmet trade-in program, where people, if they have a high impact, they can send their helmet to you and then get a discount on like a similar,
I love that.
an equivalent model.
I actually haven't taken advantage of this program. And for those who don't know, they give you a 40% discount on a helmet if you take the time to turn it in and send it in, right? Or
Yeah, I
what?
think that's our crash replacement policy. Yes.
I am curious. So you guys get these helmets that have been through some gnarly impacts. What do you do with them? Like, do you study them? Does someone come in with a helmet and you're like, oh, guys, check this out? Like, what do you guys do with those helmets?
We always study the helmets that we get in return. And it's part of the R&D process to try to learn as much as possible, basically. And that's one thing that's very important. If you've had a major impact, you should always replace a helmet.
I'd have a pile of just like used helmets, and I replace them every time I take a major hit, or
Yeah,
every
and
3 to 5
also
years.
3 to 5 years is kind of like a good guideline. Even though the Whitewater helmets have kind of like a high memory foam, especially designed to be able to cope with multiple impacts more than, let's say, the material that we're using in other helmets, it's still a crushable foam. So if the impact is severe enough, that's how you kind of dissipate energy, is by basically crushing the shock absorbing material.
But are there any trends that you've noticed in the helmets that you've gotten back? Or are they all a different story?
They're all a different story. But luckily they seem to have done their job, basically.
I would be really interested in how all these helmets come back, in what condition they're in. The people who do choose to to trade them in, you know? And when I see
But
people,
very often you
Mhm.
really don't see that much of a damage because the way the helmets are constructed, the kind of deformation happens inside the helmet. It's sometimes very difficult to detect whether your helmet has kept its integrity or not. So if you're in doubt, you should really replace it.
This can be the difference between life and life-altering injury or death. So, it's quite serious what you do. But can you tell me, like, what do you love about your job?
Well, first and foremost, I'm very passionate about the different sports that we do. I'm also extremely passionate about design and engineering. And I would say I'm lucky to work with a very talented group of designers that do something that we feel is meaningful. Being passionate about what we do, I think, is what provides the insight in order to be able to create meaningful products for different athletes in different areas of sport.
you guys are one of the top manufacturers for whitewater helmets, probably the top manufacturer for whitewater helmets in the world. What do you want people to know as a helmet manufacturer?
I think maybe what made us go into this in the first place was try to make equipment that was functional, comfortable, and kind of fit the job, so you didn't have to worry about it when you were out pursuing your passion. So when you're on the river, it should be you and the water and having a great time.
I like that.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's just been wonderful getting to know you and learning a little bit more about just kind of how you guys do things behind the scenes. Really appreciate your time.
Likewise,
We're so
thanks for
grateful.
having me.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Hope to see you on the river somewhere.
You too.
No
Thank
doubt.
you.
I hope so soon.
Prior to working on this, I think I was certainly assuming that if a helmet was on a shelf in an outfitter, especially an outdoor outfitter that I trusted, that the helmet would be fine.
I think most of us thought that too before the Virginia Tech study came out and before their testing happened. I think most of us thought, oh, if it's on the shelf, it's been tested, that means it's automatically going to be safe enough. It's automatically safe.
Another assumption, higher price, better safety. Not true.
You would think if you put out more money for a more expensive helmet, it's automatically going to be better tested, better quality. But there's no correlation between price and quality of helmet.
Well, that's something
And
that Barry
protection.
said. He said, sometimes the fancier designs, the lower profile or the ventilation, those things can get more expensive, or certain materials are more expensive, but that doesn't mean that it's actually going to protect your skull and your brain, or your brain certainly, from concussions more.
Another assumption is that a brand that tested well will always test well. In my bad example, the Sweet Strutter is the one that I got injured in. But I wear Sweet Rockers, and the Sweet Rockers have saved my life.
Also, another assumption, I paddle class 3, so, I need less protection than someone who, is maybe doing more extreme things than me.
I think that's a huge assumption, though, because I think even we have a bias against the type of whitewater. Like, if you're a creeker, you think, well, I assume most of the risk is mine. But I think that the truth is that most paddling deaths happen in class 3 or less. Most paddling head injuries likely happen in class 3 or less because most paddlers are on class 3 or less. And the thing is, you can take an impact going 6.5 to 10 miles an hour on class 3 quite easily. Water is a really good cushion when it's between you and the rocks, but that cushion has a limit.
So it's not.
And concussions are a very real problem in paddle sports. And that rotational momentum Barry was talking about makes me think about the kind of helmets that we use.
I mean, one of the wildest things to me from learning about all of this is that Barry said that the standard for whitewater helmets is just the lowest
of any sport.
That is crazy to me. And
It's
until,
insane.
I don't know, the community comes together and a governing body, whether that's the ACA or American Whitewater, I'm not even sure, or manufacturers, they could get together and say, we're going to, meet a standard that is comparable to another sport that is tougher than the CE 1385.
It's a little crazy too, because the European Union standard is so old and it's based on such little data that, kayaking has really changed over the years, and more people take more and more impacts. They're rolling more and more. in different ways. They're hitting rocks all the time. And the data, if you look at the ACA survey, people are hitting their heads.
Okay, when we're talking Virginia Tech, I know people had a lot of opinions about the results when they first came out. And I have to say that I don't know, I'm personally disappointed in the companies that pushed back against the results and said that they weren't testing appropriately or they were somehow misguided. To me, it's those companies had an opportunity to reach out to the lab. They're definitely willing to work with manufacturers to come up with better tests, you know?
It's crazy to me that they would say, oh, that testing isn't appropriate or it doesn't work, but we're not going to help you make it better.
Yeah, I mean,
right? Like, why would they do that? And then also to just kind of like bury it or try to discredit it, or like one company even put out a statement that we're worried about traumatic brain injury, not concussion. They're the same thing.
I don't know,
A
concussion
concussion
sounds...
is a traumatic brain injury, and okay, you're trying to just prevent a skull fracture, but not a concussion. Maybe word it that way. But when you have this many paddlers having concussions,
Yeah, and
why don't you want more?
I don't know. I'm just disappointed in that. I think there's an opportunity to make the test better, or, if for some reason you're not able to make your product better, then, you can say we meet the minimum standards and, we appreciate these tests, but, we're not able to change our designs right now. I just feel like there's a transparency there, or kind of an acceptance instead of attacking the test.
It's almost like they don't think paddlers are worth protecting. And I think that's the sad thing about it, is that they're taking the test personally rather than saying, oh, it didn't do very well. We need to really do more to protect these paddlers. What do we have to do as a paddle sports industry to say we want stricter standards on our helmets, or we want that, EN certification to be a little bit higher speed? We want our helmets to be closer to snowboarding or mountain biking, downhill biking. The problem is we're a small sport and there's a very small data set on our sport. And so getting those standards to where we can really trust them is going to be kind of difficult.
Yeah. And again, these companies have met the minimum standard, but maybe we need to reach for a little bit more than the minimum.
Yeah, maybe they'll reach for more now. I certainly hope so.
I certainly hope so. I was encouraged, Barry from Virginia Tech said that they are willing to do more testing. Ståle, excuse me for mispronouncing his name, said that, as a manufacturer, he would welcome more data and, as well to make helmets safer. So I would just love to see if there's possible a way that we can get them that data. So we're going to talk with Barry about maybe creating a form you can fill out if you've been if you've had an injury, if you've been in an accident.
Maybe we can find a way for all of you guys to contribute.
We all can. We also wanted to come up with a framework for thinking about the next time that you are purchasing a whitewater helmet and you are navigating that risk, what could help you? So we have a couple questions that we're going to ask ourselves.
Yeah, so breaking down this framework, the first question is, what do you want it to do? Can you trust it? Does it fit me? It's very simple. Are you going to be paddling in deep water? Are you going to be paddling in a shallow river? Paddling in a deep water class 3 river versus the ACOE class 3 is very different.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that this opened my eyes to is, helmets that might be streamlined for competitions, for example, freestyle competitions, they might have a lower star rating at Virginia Tech, but, that can be acceptable if you're just planning on jumping on a wave and jumping off. For me, I want the highest protection at all times. That I just, I want to protect my head. So I'm just always going to wear the largest, safest helmet, but that might mean it's a little bit more clunky, but I frankly don't mind.
This has me looking at hockey helmets.
Yeah, that was another surprise of just, Barry was like, maybe, wearing a helmet from a different sport might be a good idea. But I think the next question is, can you trust it? And to me, that means doing the research and looking at the best data that we have, which is the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab's test results right now.
It's the most pertinent testing for our helmets that we have access to. Part of that trust issue, though, that you have to really think about is on these helmets, if it is made for another sport and it performed really well in another sport, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to perform great after it's been submerged for a day.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's different materials used in those other helmets. Maybe they'll rust, maybe they'll degrade in water. Our kayaking gear is abused pretty regularly. And so a part of that trust equation is also asking yourself, was this helmet designed in a way that can continue to be used day after day in whitewater? And other helmets may not be the answer. So we really have to think about the helmets that we're using.
And that last question, which I know is big on, Boyd put out a survey.
Yeah, most people said, fit is the number one thing that they care about in helmets. But the truth is, as Barry pointed out, fit does not necessarily correlate with the overall safety. There's like a right amount of movement that's okay. But in whitewater, we're also moving around, and that force of water is moving around in a way that I've watched clients get big goose eggs on their foreheads because their helmet lifted just a little bit. Fit is important for whitewater. I think that we need our helmets to stay put.
Yeah. But also that relates to, are you willing to follow the directions to use it as it's recommended? So if you don't strap your helmet, or, I don't know.
Or if you cut out the little plastic piece that I do, like you're taking on a certain amount of risk for yourself. Like for me, I'll take the ice cream headache and the lack of stitches any day of the week. But these are all really thoughtful considerations that you need to have. So the basic framework is this. What do I want to do with it? Can I trust it? Does it fit me?
And it takes a bit of effort, but at the end of the day, it's our heads and it really matters. And until we as a community come up with a standard that manufacturers have to meet here in the US, we are a little bit on our own and, reliant on the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab or another lab, that certainly could provide similar results.
We're going to be branching out down the road to a variety of topics that I think you guys are really going to be interested in.
I mean, I want to learn how to get better at risk assessment and also navigating pressure. So I'm kind of responding instead of reacting.
It'll be great. I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. Also those big moments that, sometimes are everyday decisions and sometimes there are decisions that really change us. So I am looking forward to hearing those stories too.
We'll see you guys next time on Crossing Currents.